Hi everyone, welcome to SYNAPSE Talks from SYNAPSE UFT. In this podcast, we chat with professionals within the field of neuroscience to learn more about their work, careers, and insights. I'm Natusha, a fourth-year student majoring in human biology and neuroscience.
And I'm Laiba, a third-year student majoring in psychology and neuroscience. Today, our guest speaker is Dr. Robert Rozeske, an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology here at UTSC and principal investigator at the Rozeske Lab. He teaches a number of neuroscience courses, including the second-year course Neurophysiology, which some of you may know him from.
Dr. Rozeske, thank you for chatting with us today. We're very excited to have you here with us and learn more about you and your work, especially you. Let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So, I'm happy to be here, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak with you all. I'm from the U.S. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I, went to an undergraduate school, a small liberal arts school in Minnesota, and that's where I would say I first, was exposed to psychology and neuroscience as well. And, from then on, it was kind of just one thing after another in terms of following my neuroscience career path, and that's what's eventually brought me here.
Can you specify what you did after undergrad and how you got from there to here?
Yeah, so, the thing is after undergrad, or I should say during undergrad, there were professors that were really inspiring to me and got me interested in neuroscience. And they're the ones that, saw my interest and encouraged me to apply. And so for graduate school. And when I was applying to graduate school, I was basically as instructed by these professors, is that I was going through PubMed and just searching the topics I was interested in and seeing who was publishing on them. And then I applied to a handful of schools, and the one I decided to go to was out in Colorado. It was in Boulder, Colorado, University of Colorado, and it was in a lab that was run by Steve Mayer, who may be familiar to some of you. He's a co-founder of Learned Helplessness. So Marty Seligman and Steve Mayer came out with that landmark paper in 1967, I believe, where they first showed the learned helplessness phenomenon. So that's where I went to grad school, and after that, I took a couple different postdocs, and one was out in France, in Bordeaux, France, and then I had a second postdoc in Montreal at McGill, and then eventually I ended up here. And it's, the thing about science and research actually that was really inspiring, especially, leaving Minnesota, which is kind of a homogenous community of people, and then going to Colorado is, in that lab there were researchers from Australia, from Venezuela, from Iran, from China, like they were from all over the world. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that, in research, there's some borders with it, but you can do research in a lot of different countries and meet a lot of different people. And it's kind of nice, especially, when I reflect on how polarized people can be now with their beliefs and politics within the lab in science. I think it's people from all different backgrounds really working for as a collective to accomplish something. And that period in grad school, that's what inspired me basically to go do a postdoc in France. Like, I didn't speak French. I'd never been to France before that, but I saw it as an opportunity through this mechanism of science and research to travel the world and live abroad.
Was it hard leaving France?
Yeah, it was really hard. It was, going to France was a tough thing too, right? Like I was leaving a lot of friends in Colorado that I'd, had really bonded with through the shared experience of graduate school. But I also, made amazing friends in France that were incredibly patient with me. Like, I showed up, I didn't know how to speak any French. Like the thing I would say is, like, I showed up there and I'd go to the park, and like there'd be people playing with their dog, and the dog would know more French than me, right? Like it was really a struggle at first to get along there in the social domain anyways. And scientifically it was amazing and easy. Everyone conducts research in English, because English is the language of research. All the journals are published in it. So no issues in that regard. But, socially it was a little bit of an uphill battle. And then, you meet the right people. There's an alchemy. And, next thing you know, you have lifelong friends. And so, leaving was really tough. But I'd say the same thing about leaving Montreal as well. Like, it's always tough.
Well, it sounds like you've had a really interesting experience in your education. You've met a lot of cool people and learned French and probably a lot of other skills as well. I'm sure that geographic location is not the most important thing to consider when students are applying to grad school. So in your opinion, what is something that they should consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the thing is, when you're considering a program, you really should follow the question, right? You need to figure out basically what you're interested in. And of course, you're going to be applying to a school with a particular reputation or prestige, and also, a location that's maybe geographically desirable or undesirable, depending on your perspective. But, the critical factor is really the lab that you're going to be working with, and the principal investigator who's going to be your advisor. This is the person that you're going to be interacting with day in and day out. And ultimately, you're there to conduct research. And so there's always secondary considerations of school, like the university itself and the city it's in. But I would strongly consider and almost like solely consider the person that you'll be working with as an advisor, and certainly the folks in their lab too.
It's very hard to get both, like the question or the people. So how was your experience in that?
So it's a tough thing, right? I think you're alluding to, like, sometimes you might find yourself researching a topic that you're extremely passionate about, but then you just loathe your lab mates, right? And that's tough, right? Like, how do you grapple with that? And ideally, you have that trifecta of, like, you love your advisor, you love your lab mates, you love the question. And if you don't, like, there's always mechanisms to transfer to other labs. Like, when you're in a lab, like, you're part of a department or program, and once you're in that program, usually there are mechanisms to transfer to other labs if it's not working out. And typically, from an advisor's perspective, like, if it's not working out for the student, it's probably not working out for the advisor either. And it's just one of those things where maybe it's tough to bring up, but it's probably a mutual feeling that it's maybe not the best fit. And the thing is to just identify that as soon as possible, and realize that you're not, like, in this 5-year prison sentence of having to be in a lab until you finish your PhD.
That's very true. Communication is really important in terms of research.
Well, we've heard about your experiences with applying to and finding graduate programs, but you're also a PI and you recruit graduate students as well. So what are your perspectives, and do you have any advice for people also applying to grad schools?
Yeah, the thing is I have a lot of advice, actually, I guess. Like, the thing is like, you have to remember that, what a lab is doing is day in and day out, they're basically solving puzzles, right? And they're troubleshooting questions, and trying to solve hypotheses. And, like, they're devoting so much time to that, right? A lot of time they're truly invested in trying to understand a phenomenon. And they're taking publicly funded money to do so as well, too, right? Like, that's how we get our money. Is sometimes it's private foundations, but typically it's taxpayer money. And so the thing is that's kind of the context to which you're applying to, right? So from a student's perspective, you have to, the student should appreciate that the person that they're applying to is, like, truly invested in a topic, and they're thinking about it a lot, and they're accountable to public, funds, and they're accountable to the success of their students or their trainees in their lab. So when you contact a professor to work in their lab, like, you should really, you should show, not tell, your interest, right? Like, that's the important thing. What we would love to do more than anything in the world is recruit someone who's passionate about the research topic, because we're passionate about it and we want to work with people passionate about it. But when you receive that like email from a student asking to work in the lab and they're not showing a specific interest, like a very specific interest to your research topic, well, that's fine. You might have a really strong transcript and be a nice person and polite and all of these things, right? But I think what's going to make the biggest impact on the person on the other end reading it is that you're expressing and showing like true interest in that specific research topic. And then we get excited, right? We get really excited about recruiting someone that's, totally into this topic, and we'll jump at the opportunity when that arises.
I guess this kind of goes with what you were talking about, how like if you're a PI, you have so many things you have to do, like writing grant proposal. I know there's a lot of setbacks that come with that as well, and even doing research. And so what do you think in your, academic career is your greatest achievement, and as well as like some, just setbacks that you had?
Yeah, setbacks and achievements, right? Like, hopefully one happens more than the other, right? But in reality, it's always going to be the case that in any professional setting, you're going to have setbacks, right? And, the thing is you basically have to figure out how to frame those, like they can be setbacks and you think like the world is like against you and, you can have that emotional response. But I think, the thing that I would strive to do, and I can't say I do it in every moment of every day, but like what I would strive to do is take those setbacks and use them as an opportunity to learn how to improve myself. And I think it fundamentally comes down to, was your strategy for preparation not optimal? Or, did the thing that you prepare not actually address what it was supposed to? Like there's always, whenever you're trying to accomplish something, there's a certain rubric, let's say for a class, or if you're writing a grant, there's a certain, criteria that, it's all publicly available and you can work hard to produce this product, but if it doesn't hit basically the criteria, the assessment criteria, then, you haven't really used your time in the right way. So figuring out, if your deliverable actually did hit the assessment criteria or not. So I think those are things to do in those moments where you haven't like achieved what you wanted to achieve. The thing about also setbacks is like trying to focus on what basically are the things you can control. And there's always going to be extraneous factors in any sort of competition or thing that you're applying for. And you can't control them. Don't let them bog you down. Focus on the things you can control. And that's all you can really do. So I think, that's how I try to deal with setbacks. And it should be known that, as you brought up, we like have setbacks all the time. And what became really interesting, social media about 10 years ago is these very accomplished professors, that I look up to, that, seem to be shining in every domain of their life. They published, or people were publishing like a failure CV. And so then you actually see, publicly all the things they applied to, all the grants they didn't get, all the manuscripts that got rejected. And, it humanizes them, and it also makes you, brings you back to reality too. And you realize that, not everyone is always accomplishing every single thing they're striving for. So I think that's important to take into consideration, that we're all dealing with failures. And then in terms of successes, it's, celebrate them. They can be few and far between. So always, take time. Like really like, you could say like, oh, I accomplished that, time to move on. But I think, treat yourself and like take the time to celebrate your successes because they don't always happen in close succession to each other.
Well, I guess talking about successes, what's been your greatest achievement or something that you're proud of with respect to your career?
Yeah, the thing is like what I would say the thing that gives me the most like satisfaction or makes me like feel warm inside is really seeing the successes of either the trainees in my lab or the students that I'm teaching here at UTSC. And as related to the students I'm teaching, I am in a position of teaching 3 courses that are basically a second-year course, third-year course, and fourth-year course. And despite the fact that I'm still pretty new here, I've been here long enough to see people go through that progression, and I've seen their growth throughout that period, and that gives me, a lot of satisfaction to see that they are intellectually growing throughout these years. And of course, it can always be debated what my direct influence was on that. I'd like to think a little bit. You never know, but yeah, that's something that makes me feel good. And even, we don't even have to go to 3 years. There's students in some of my previous courses that didn't perform so well on the midterm, and then you see by the final they've locked it in and they're shining, and that's great to see that upward trajectory for students. And then yeah, in terms of our research team, there's graduate students, trainees in the lab that they're constantly applying for travel awards, for fellowships, to get into conferences to present their research, and when they are successful at those endeavors, that makes me feel really good. It makes me feel that I've created somehow an environment or a situation such that like I gave them the tools to succeed. And as I said, like you can always argue what my direct influence was, but I think like at the very least the environment was there, and I'm happy that they were able to thrive in that environment.
Thank you very much for that answer. It's so important to hear from our professors about their setbacks and also their achievements. You spoke about the 3 courses that you teach at UTSC. Is there one in particular that you really enjoy or maybe dislike?
Yeah, I love them all. It's like, you don't ask a parent which kid they love the most, right? They're never going to tell you to your face, right? Unless,
what does that mean?
Yeah, maybe you could speak to different experience. But I guess, I love all the courses, and I've been, again, quite fortunate that when I was hired here by the psychology department, I was speaking with the department chair about what their needs were for courses, and there's just this magical synergy such that like the courses they needed to be taught happened to be the ones that were like quite related to my research background, and so that's great, right? Like I don't have to teach a course that I know nothing about, so already off to a great start, and I think they all offer different levels of understanding, and like the first course, the second year course that I teach, or largely second year course, is the neurophysiology course, NROB61, and that one is one of those courses where we're really breaking down, we're looking at the foundations of neurophysiology, the biophysical principles that drive a neuron to create an action potential. We're going beyond just saying like action potentials happen. We're saying like, what are the nuts and bolts that make it happen? And if you change those nuts and bolts, why won't it happen? Or why might it happen better, right? Like thinking about, the actual parts that give rise to the phenomenon and how you can play around with them. True understanding of this very basic thing. And I think for a lot of students, that's like very satisfying. I think they really love having these definitive answer. There's like very small gray zones, and that's great, foundations. And then, another course I teach is drugs in the brain, and that's SYNAPSE. And in that course, right, like we're completely different setup, right? We're talking about how drugs affect mostly people, sometimes animals, and now you're bringing into the equation all of these things about genetic background, age, experience, drug use, and you're introducing something as dirty as a drug. Dirty meaning it's going to have multiple effects at multiple receptors in the body, and now you're like your conclusions that you can draw, like you're hovering in the gray zones. But I also really like that course because I'm interested in behavior, and I'm interested in how drugs can alter perception, and So I find it really satisfying, and I think like a lot of the students like it because it's a little bit closer to their own experience, maybe in the sense that like we're talking about people and we're talking about something tangible like substances. And then the last course is a seminar course, and those seminar courses, like those D-level courses, largely they're going to be themed based on what the professor's research background is on. And so for mine, it's physiology of learning and memory, and that's like a big part of my research program. And so in that course, right, we're looking at the primary literature, and all those papers we're looking at, they basically involve in vivo recording, and we want to understand the dynamic neuronal activity that's associated with learning and memory. And we talk a lot about different types of learning and memory. So I think it spans like a lot of topics, but the number one thing is those in vivo recordings, and I really find that interesting too. And I have students in that class that bring up, since we're reading primary literature, and I get to pick the topic, or I get to pick the papers, right? I know the papers, and it's wonderful when students are delivering a presentation of that paper to the class, and they bring up some aspect of the paper I never thought of or I missed, and that's like in one part like incredibly humbling, that like certainly I don't know all the answers, and there's always something to be discovered. And it also makes me feel great that this this student has taken the initiative to really dive deep into these topics about something that I find really interesting. So they all offer different levels of intellectual satisfaction, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with Neurobi 61, it may seem like a hard course in the beginning. It may seem like it's tough, you can't pass. But what I understood from my experience, that it's the foundation that you need for the rest of the years of neuroscience, that even not just in UTSC, beyond UTSC, like if you're going to grad school in neuro, you definitely need those foundations for sure.
Yeah, I think like, B61 is one of those courses where, like it can be hard and enjoyable. Like it you can have that phenomenon, right? And so like I would hope that students who have taken it, and ones that will take it in the future, will have, I guess, the belief or hope that like their efforts are going to be repaid back to them. And I do think it's one of those courses, while you're going through it, it's a lot to handle. There's a lot of content. It's interdisciplinary. We're talking about things like basic physics, Ohm's law, right? Like things you haven't thought about for years, right? And then talking about topics in psychology, biology, a little bit of neurochemistry. It's a lot to integrate. But the hope is that you're armed with a foundation such that you can really be prepared for those C-level and D-level courses. And so my hope is that, you're basically, during B61, you're putting it all in the bank. It's gaining interest, hopefully. And then by the time you come to your next semester and take a C-level course, you can just withdraw all that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It is a difficult course, but it's really satisfying at the end when you realize that you've learned a lot. Maybe a little slowly, but you've learned a lot, and you can see your own progress. So thank you so much for your insights. Shifting gears a little bit, I don't know if we've talked about this already, but what do you like to do in your free time to unwind and relax?
Yeah, I don't, yeah, I guess, one thing that I really like to do is to be in open spaces in nature. And I really like camping and backpacking. And that's something that when I went to grad school in Colorado, Boulder is right next to the Rockies. And so you're in wonderful proximity to all these things to do in the mountains, like trail running, camping, hiking, climbing, kayaking, all these things. And so, I really grew to love being in those types of spaces. And so I tried to do the same wherever I'm living, whether it be in France, going to like the Pyrenees, whether it be in Montreal and going to Mont Tremblant, or here, going, to some of the great provincial parks in Ontario. So I like to do that. And, I like to stay active. I think it's a great way to like to like burn off some energy that might be pent up throughout the day. So going for runs, I really like to run. And another thing I like to do is play ultimate frisbee. That's something that I picked up also in Colorado and really got into in France and try to continue doing here. And that's, it's a beautiful sport. It's one of, I would say, the most beautiful sports out there. It's like a very democratic sport in the sense that everyone can throw the disc, everyone can catch it. It has like this flat organizational structure. There's also, there's principles of spirit of the game, right? There's no umpire or referee. If there's a foul, you basically talk with the other team and you decide if it truly was a foul or not. So, it's a great sport. And then, aside from that, I like to play music, and I have some fellows I play music with. Try to do it regularly, and I think that's a lot of fun too. That's a whole other way to connect with people. You can connect with people playing sports, and that's a type of like kinetic, connection, and you can connect with people talking with them, and in other ways through musical expression. So I try to like diversify all the ways I connect with people.
A lot of different activities. I think we've all gotten a few ideas for our next hobbies, so thank you very much.
And what type of music do you listen to now that you mentioned you are interested in music and it's jazz music?
Yeah, jazz music, it was one of those things where, like I never thought I would be into jazz music, but sometimes you just take the opportunities that are afforded to you. And my high school music program, like concert band and jazz, were amazing, like very dedicated instructors. And specifically with jazz, the instructor was quite ambitious, and he took us on a lot of competitions. And we were able to like perform in New York at the Lincoln Center. And so that was like amazing to meet these like jazz icons like Wynton Marsalis, and as a high schooler, it was just amazing. And as I said, I wasn't necessarily like going to be a jazz musician the rest of my life, but you take those opportunities and you take them as they come. And so I don't think I dabble too much in playing jazz anymore. But the other types of music, what was the question? What music I listen to? Well, okay, so I guess if I think about what I most recently listened to, I was listening to this artist, Cindy Lee, who is from Alberta, and they came out with an album a couple months ago, and it was actually nominated for Polaris Award. I don't think it got it in the end, but it's a beautiful album. So I've been listening to that a lot. And another album I was listening to recently was one by Bill Frisell, who's a jazz guitarist, incidentally. And the album was something like Happy Man, Good Dog, Happy Man, or something like that. But I try to listen to a lot of different music, and I try to talk to friends and colleagues, find out what they're listening to, and try to diversify as much as possible. I really like, I subscribe to, I think it was like I don't know who it was. It's not my quote, but there's this quote, like there's no such thing as bad music.
I think some people might disagree. That's a great answer, and we're gonna try out some of that music. So we're nearing the end of our time here. Before we say goodbye, can we do a round of rapid fire questions where when Natusha and I are gonna ask a question,
Whatever
and you
comes
can
to our mind.
right, and you can just give us a one-word answer.
One word.
Yeah, no, just really quick.
Okay.
So, do you want to begin?
Yes. What's your favorite color?
Green.
What's your favorite country?
USA.
What's your favorite animal?
TikTok.
Mouse.
Crow.
Oh, wow. What is your favorite planet?
Earth.
Who's your favorite professor at UTSC?
May Diane Andrade.
Who's your
biological sciences?
least favorite? Okay, no, you don't have to answer that. What is your favorite food to cook?
Desserts.
Okay, so that means you're missing France more than ever. What was your favorite place, I guess, to be like hanging out at? Like, where do you like to hang out most, other than your lab?
I would say ravines, like the Toronto ravines.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Let's see. Okay, music or podcast?
Music.
Who is your favorite actor?
Yeah, I don't know. I watch a lot of movies, but I can't say I have one actor. I don't know. I don't have one.
That's all right.
What's your favorite brand?
Brand. Oh man. Stuff. I don't have one. Sorry.
Okay. What was your favorite subject in high school?
I guess it was jazz. It
Jazz.
was the jazz class. Yeah.
If not in the science field, what other job would you have done?
I think it would have been musician.
Musician.
Yeah.
Dream car.
I think it's the Volvo XC70.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think that's enough.
That is all. Well, thank you very much for your time, Professor.
Do you want to leave with the one sentence advice to students?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if I have if I have something to send you off with.
Or just something general for students maybe looking into going to like the neuroscience program, first years who were thinking about what to do, or second years?
Yeah, I think like my advice would be, if you're wanting to pursue neuroscience, dig into it, dig into your courses, find out what's the topic that interests you, and then go to your professor during office hours and ask them, say like, oh, I'm really interested in this. Do people actually research this? Like, who are some researchers that do this? Or like, and just, use them as a source to find out how to dig deeper into it. And if you are looking for a lab that you want to, work in, I think I might have mentioned, unfortunately, like we don't have the resources not every lab has the resources to bring in a lot of students. So if you apply to a lab and they can't take you, don't take it personally. Just, find the next best place and try to get your foot in the door somewhere.
Oh, that's really great advice. Well, we've learned a lot today, and we hope that our audience has also learned a little bit about your career and you as a professor. So I believe this is the end of our time here.
Yeah, thank you all for listening to this podcast, our first episode, and I guess stay tuned for more professors to come.
All right, thanks for having me.